Welcome to Auto News Talk. It is fantastic to have you listening in. There are millions of dollars of electric vehicles just sitting idle on dealership lots right now.
Yeah, and major automakers are literally hitting the pause button on production. It's pretty wild to see.
It really is. Because the automotive industry isn't just changing what's under the hood anymore. I mean, it is completely rewiring how cars are sold, valued, and, operated.
Exactly. From those overflowing dealership lots to the hidden software calculations dictating trade-in values, and even the AI literally riding shotgun with you.
Yeah, we're looking at a top-to-bottom transformation of the entire mobility sector. And to figure out what is actually going on, we are combing through some really fascinating material.
Right, things like automaker production reports, wholesale market data, retail expansion blueprints.
And even some highly technical AI hardware analyses. It's a lot to unpack.
It's a massive landscape. But we are essentially going to map out the ripple effect of the software-defined vehicle for you.
So where do we start?
Well, we'll walk through 3 distinct stages, starting right on the physical pavement of the dealer lot, managing that current EV supply.
Okay, makes sense.
Then moving into the complex math of the secondary market as these used EVs change hands. And finally, zooming into the actual microscopic computer chips that are redefining the vehicle's brain.
I love that roadmap. So jumping right into that physical lot, I was reading through a report on Stellantis, and it paints a pretty stark picture.
Oh, absolutely. They are basically halting the line.
Yeah. The report explicitly says they are pausing production of the Wagoneer S for the upcoming model year. And the reason is to clear out elevated dealer inventory.
Which is, it's financial triage, plain and simple. Automakers are designed to be continuous manufacturing pipelines.
Right. They never want to stop.
Exactly. When they stop the line, they are absorbing a massive internal cost. But the Stellantis report makes it clear they're doing this to rebalance supply and protect their retail network.
Because high dealer stock isn't just an eyesore, right?
No, not at all. It creates crushing financial pressure.
Let's break that down for someone who might not know how dealer financing works. Why does, say, an extra 30 cars on the lot cause a crisis?
Well, because dealerships don't own those cars outright. They finance them through something called floorplan interest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so every day a vehicle sits unsold, the dealer is bleeding cash, paying interest on that specific unit to a bank.
So by reducing the pipeline pressure, Stellantis is basically trying to ease those floor plan costs for the retailers.
Right, while simultaneously stabilizing the actual transaction prices.
Because if the market is flooded, dealers have to heavily discount.
Exactly, and that just destroys the residual value for people who already bought the vehicle.
Okay, it's like they are pausing the fire hose to let the drain catch up.
That's a great analogy.
While simultaneously, upgrading all the plumbing and teaching the customer how to use the new sink.
Yeah, and speaking of upgrades, that Stellantis report highlights some specific hardware and software improvements planned.
Right, and the one that really jumps off the page is their planned switch to a NACS charging port.
The North American Charging Standard? I mean, that is a brilliant strategic move.
Because it directly targets public charging friction.
Yes. Think about the current experience. You pull up to a station, you're fumbling with a clunky adapter.
Hoping the software handshakes properly, which it often doesn't.
Exactly. By switching to a native NACS port, you plug in directly. That single hardware alteration fundamentally changes the psychological barrier to ownership.
It makes the vehicle vastly more competitive in the open market. But, reading through the report, there's a glaring omission.
Oh.
Yeah. What this report doesn't answer is whether existing Wagoneer S owners will be offered NACS adapters or if they'll get software updates to compensate.
Oh, that's a huge blind spot.
Right. If you were a buyer looking at that elevated current inventory, you're left wondering if you were purchasing instant obsolescence.
Which creates a massive dilemma for the consumer. I mean, do you buy now with a heavy discount or wait for the native hardware?
Yeah. And while the manufacturer wrestles with production lines, the physical dealerships on the ground are having to completely rethink their real estate.
Which brings us perfectly to the retail perspective. There's a report on Whelan's Automotive expanding their footprint that really illustrates this.
Yeah, the Whelan's report, they're opening a new Oxford Kia store, right?
Right. They're expanding their Thames Valley footprint specifically to handle electrification and new vehicle formats.
So they're filling a geographic gap. But what are they actually building?
Well, what stands out in Whelan's report is their intensive focus on standardizing processes for unfamiliar drivetrains.
Because the traditional dealership model is just, what, a showroom and a service bay?
Exactly. But The shift to electric and software-defined vehicles is forcing the physical dealership to become this sort of technology and education hub.
Right, because you aren't just tossing the keys to a customer anymore.
No, you have to explain regenerative braking, app integration, charging curves.
Physical dealerships are more important than ever for tech education. It's wild.
It is, and the Whelan's report highlights a specific detail that complicates this even further. They are intensely focused on what they call PBV commercial vehicles.
Purpose-built vehicles.
Correct. As businesses shift to low-emission transport, fleet managers are buying these highly modular, purpose-built electric vans.
Oh, so under one Oxford IKEA roof, you have salespeople acting as tech tutors for private buyers terrified of charging.
While simultaneously acting as logistics consultants for commercial fleet managers overhauling their entire delivery networks.
It is a massive operational pivot. Though, if you are going to be an electrification hub handling consumer EVs and commercial PBVs, the background power logistics have to be staggering.
Oh, absolutely. The grid pull would be immense.
And that is actually a limitation of this specific report.
Yeah.
It leaves an open question regarding the site's specific on-site charging infrastructure and capacity.
Yeah, because you can't service and deliver dozens of commercial EVs a day without a massive grid connection.
Definitely not. But let's follow the life cycle of these vehicles, right? Fixing the cars on the lot and upgrading the dealership is really just phase one.
Right, because once those cars leave the lot, age a bit, and return as trade-ins or lease returns, the complexity doesn't just double, it goes exponential.
I really want to look at the secondary market because we have a market update from Cox Automotive that tracks wholesale pricing and inventory.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, I went into this expecting a bloodbath, but their findings completely surprised me. The Cox update reports that used EV values are actually holding up well.
Wait, really? Even as the supply of these vehicles expands?
Yeah, that resilience is a crucial macroeconomic signal.
In their market insights, they lean heavily on the MUVVI, right? The Manheim Used Vehicle Value Index.
Exactly. That index is the gold standard directional gauge for wholesale pricing.
And it is worth noting that this enterprise-level view is led by Chief Economist Jeremy Robb.
Which means this isn't just an optimistic guess. It is a highly robust analysis of how inventory impacts pricing power.
I do wish we had the raw data to play with, though.
Yeah, that's a limitation. Because the specific numbers aren't published on the page, we lack the exact MUVVI figures to see the granular shifts.
But still, that direct quote that used EV values are holding up well despite more vehicles entering the channel, that has to be a massive relief for lenders.
And dealers trying to set their stocking strategies, yeah.
It is a relief, theoretically. Resale stability gives banks the confidence to write loans. But here's where we need to push back on that optimism a bit.
Okay, why?
Just because the theoretical value of the vehicle is holding up does not mean the actual transaction of selling it is functioning properly.
Wait, if the car is worth good money, why is selling it a problem? So buying a used car isn't just about kicking the tires anymore.
No, because of the math. When you look at the Cox data next to a different analysis we have on used EV lease returns, you suddenly see this massive hidden crisis waiting to happen.
Oh, the projected surge.
Yes. The lease return analysis outlines a wave of more than 300,000 EV lease returns about to hit the market.
300,000. That's a huge influx.
And think about the origin of those 300,000 vehicles. Many were leased a few years ago with highly optimistic residual values, heavily subsidized by complex tax credits.
And now they're all flooding back to dealer lots.
Exactly. And the analysis explicitly warns that legacy DMS dealer management systems are completely failing to handle the math required to process them.
How does a dealership computer system just fail? I mean, it's essentially a giant calculator, right?
Well, think of a traditional DMS like a basic calculator. It is fantastic for taking the price of a gas-powered car, adding a fixed sales tax, rolling in a document fee, and spitting out a monthly payment.
Sure, straightforward.
But an EV deal is like dynamic calculus. The report refers to this as the calculation layer. Dealers literally have to audit the battery's chemical health.
Wait, meaning they aren't just looking at the odometer?
No, they are plugging into the car to see how the battery has degraded chemically, and that exact percentage dictates the price.
That is wild.
It is battery degradation pricing. If you have two identical EVs with 30,000 miles, but one was fast charged constantly and the other was trickle charged, Their chemical state of health is completely different.
So their values are completely different.
Exactly. The legacy systems aren't built to ingest chemical health metrics, and if that wasn't enough, you have to add the fragmentation of state regulations on top of it.
Oh, right. The tax problem.
Yeah, states are realizing they are losing millions in gas tax revenue because EVs don't use gas stations.
So the lease return report points out that states are inventing state-specific EV registration surcharges.
And that calculation layer is a minefield. A dealer has to instantly figure out, is this local EV surcharge supposed to be financed into the loan? Is it taxed?
Dealers literally have to audit the battery's chemical health and cross-reference a dozen local tax codes simultaneously.
Yes. If the DMS gets it wrong on the contract, the bank will kick the deal back. Or worse, it triggers a massive compliance violation.
So dealers have to invest in incredibly accurate calculation infrastructure just to protect their margins and consumer trust.
Exactly. Though, to be fair to anyone listening who wants to know what their local DMV is up to, the report leaves a major blank space.
Yeah, what it doesn't answer is exactly which specific states are adopting the new flat EV surcharges versus the vehicle miles traveled pilots.
It is a moving target. But think about what we've covered so far.
The physical infrastructure on the lot is paralyzed by supply issues.
The physical dealerships are being rebuilt into education centers.
And the back-end accounting software is short-circuiting, trying to calculate chemical health and local taxes.
Right. But all of this chaos is really just a symptom of the bigger disruption happening inside the dashboard.
Which brings us to the brain of the vehicle itself, the actual chips and AI.
Exactly.
And for this, we have a really interesting report looking at Volkswagen in China.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
They are making a massive push to localize in-car AI. It's not just about, slapping a bigger touchscreen in the dash.
No, they are partnering with domestic tech giants to remain competitive in an era where software, not horsepower, defines the car.
Because if they don't do this, they will be entirely irrelevant in that market.
Right. Volkswagen is integrating an AI voice agent that runs directly on the device for all vehicles on their China car system.
They are abandoning the idea of doing it all themselves and are integrating technology from local heavyweights like Tencent, Alibaba, and Baidu.
And the hardware choice here is wild.
Right.
The report notes they are specifically using XPeng's Turing chip.
That's a huge detail. Volkswagen, a legacy German automaker, is bypassing global standards like Nvidia.
Exactly. Instead, they're buying local chips from XPeng to build a region-specific compute stack.
Let's look at why that matters.
Well, what's fascinating here is that automakers are realizing that a global one-size-fits-all software platform doesn't work.
You have to speak the local digital dialect natively.
Exactly. By processing the AI on the edge, meaning the computation happens right there on the XPeng Turing chip, physically inside the car, Volkswagen significantly lowers latency.
Because it doesn't have to beam your voice command to a cloud server hundreds of miles away and wait for a response.
Right. If you rely on the cloud and drive into a dead zone, your highly advanced car suddenly becomes incredibly dumb.
Edge computing fixes that. The voice assistant responds instantly, regardless of cell service.
Which is exactly what the Chinese consumer base demands.
The VW report also highlights that they are moving toward agentic AI. Let's explain that, because agentic AI is very different from the voice assistants we have in our phones right now.
Oh, completely. Standard voice AI is reactive. You say, turn on the heated seats, and it executes that single command.
But agentic AI has agency.
Yes. It can reason and execute complex, multi-step workflows. It is deeply integrated into the cockpit functions and the driver assistance systems.
So instead of just turning on a seat heater, an agentic AI could notice your battery is low, negotiate with the battery management system to precondition the cells, autonomously reroute the navigation to a fast charger.
And draft an email to your boss saying you will be 10 minutes late, all without you having to touch a screen.
That is the goal. And by doing all their R&D locally, Volkswagen can iterate at a speed that a global headquarters simply couldn't match.
But as advanced as this Turing chip is, there is an unresolved issue regarding the life cycle of this technology.
Right. The report leaves an open question as to how future on-device software upgrades will be delivered.
Yeah, if this advanced AI requires a massive architectural update in 3 years, will it be delivered seamlessly via over-the-air updates, or will it require a physical dealer visit?
And we are right back to Whelan's Automotive. If you need a physical dealer visit to upgrade your AI brain, that dealership in the Thames Valley better have the immense tech infrastructure to handle it.
Exactly. When you step back, you really start to see these massive, overarching patterns connecting all these disparate reports.
The most obvious theme is how infrastructure is completely dictating corporate strategy.
Right. We see it supported by Stellantis shifting to the NACS port, specifically to solve the friction of physical public chargers.
And we see it at the retail level too, supported by Whelan's pouring money into physical support centers just to handle test drives and tech education.
There's also a massive theme around valuation complexity.
Yes, supported by the Cox report, showing that resale resilience is holding up well.
But that's directly clashing with the intricate calculation layer we saw in the lease returns analysis. The value exists, but capturing it legally through failing DMS calculators is harder than ever.
And the final theme is that software is the ultimate battleground.
Supported by Volkswagen literally buying local Chinese XPeng chips to win the AI latency war.
And supported by Whelan's focusing heavily on educating buyers on software-defined vehicles.
It's a completely different business. But we also have to acknowledge the underlying tensions here.
Yeah, there's a glaring contradiction between supply and demand.
Right. Explicitly looking at the Cox report, it proves that used EV values are holding up well, indicating solid demand.
Yet, on the new side, Stellantis is literally pausing Wagoneer S production to clear out suffocating inventory. The transition is incredibly uneven.
There is also this fascinating tension between global scale and hyper-local execution. Automakers are massive, global entities.
But success requires hyperlocal solutions. VW using Chinese chips, and dealers navigating highly fragmented state-by-state EV taxes.
Which leaves us with one incredibly practical takeaway.
Dealerships, and the automakers that supply them, must evolve beyond simply moving metal.
They must become compliance experts, technology educators, and localized software integrators.
The mechanics of buying, selling, and driving are all being rewritten at the exact same time. And that is going to wrap up this segment of Auto News Talk.
We covered a ton of ground, from the overflowing lots to the complex back-end math, down to the localized chips thinking inside the dashboard.
The future of auto isn't just electric. It's calculated, localized, and entirely software-defined.
It really is.
So next time you look at a modern vehicle on a lot, ask yourself, are you buying a car or are you buying a localized software ecosystem on wheels?